Welcome to this beginner tutorial in which we will create and host this tic-tac-toe game with an history feature by using React, Tailwindcss and DaisyUI. In this tutorial we are using Vite to generate a template and build the app from there. To create the template we are typing npm create Vite at latest and then a dot to create the template in the same directory which we are in at the moment. You don't have to install Vite manually, it will install it automatically with this command. Now we are choosing React as our framework and JavaScript as the language. So if it worked, you can see there is the template with some assets and some pre-written code. So we can test this by running the command npm e or npm install to install the dependencies of the template. After they are installed, you can see up there this node module order directory. And to test if it works, we can type npm run dev and you can open it in a new tab, and then this is the template and you can see it is working. Now we can change the template so we can start in the next section. First of all, we can delete the public folder, we don't need this, and also the assets directory. Then we also can delete the app.css file, and in the index.css file we can delete the entire content. In the app.jsx we can delete all of those imports and we can delete everything in there, and we can create some div with some text in it. Yeah, we also have to delete the useState in there. And there you can see is the test. And then we have to set up Tailwindcss and DaisyUI. So we're opening a new terminal window, and first of all we have to install those. So npm install Tailwindcss and add Tailwindcss/Vite, and then for DaisyUI add latest to get the latest version of the package. After those installed, we can now go into the index.css and add import Tailwindcss, and beneath that add plugin DaisyUI, and then we have to go into the vite.config.js and import Tailwind up there, Tailwind from Tailwind/Vite, and then we have to go into the plugins array and add the Tailwind function, Tailwind CSS, and then if we save this, go into our app.jsx and add a class name and say text -red -500, which is a CSS class from Tailwindcss, and save this. Then go back, you can see the text is red now, and we know now that the Tailwindcss is working. In the next section we will create the board and the square components. So now for the board and the squares. We can create inside of the source directory a new folder called components, and inside of that we can create the board.jsx file. And inside the file we are creating a React functional export component. So React is a front-end library, and it has this feature called components. And with this component you can basically define a function. So this is a React component, and you can use it in other components or HTML files by calling it like an HTML self-closing tag, and you can basically load the content from the board.jsx component. And yeah, so we are using that, and we are also using it for these squares, so we don't have to create every square beneath, in the board component. So to do that, we are creating a square.jsx file and the React function component. So we can call the square component inside there. Yeah, we can also do it twice and three times, and instead of adding every time this div with this square in the board.jsx, we can just call the square component. So it is much more modular. And a component, you can pass down variables, so-called props, and we can do that by adding circular curly brackets inside of the normal brackets from the function, and we can say something like a value, and now we can refer to the prop value inside of our component, save that, and then we have to go inside of the board component and add the value like an attribute from a normal HTML tag and give it a value, for example 1. Save that, and now you can see it says square 1, but we didn't say square 1 inside of the square. And you can now copy that and do it for every square. And now you can see there's square 1, square 2, and square 3. So now that we have a basic understanding of components, we want to use DaisyUI to make it look better. So DaisyUI has some pre-built components and CSS styles and themes, and we are using the themes and styles in this video. So to do that, we are going in the index.css, adding curly brackets behind the DaisyUI import, and then we can say themes and import the themes. You can either import all themes by typing all, or you can specify the theme. So for example, you want the coffee theme, and save that. So you can get the whole list at the DaisyUI.com. They have these themes part, and there is the list of all the themes which are available. In this video I will use the coffee one, but you can use any theme from there. So now that we have to apply the theme after we imported it. So we're going to the root div and adding a data-theme attribute, and there we can define the theme which we want to use. So I will say coffee, and now you can see the background color change and also the color of the text. Now for the square component, we want to be able to press a square to set the value to your playing character. So to do that, we can make the square a button, and now we can press these, and we can also give it some styling. For example, we can say the width is 30, the height is also 30. We have a border with the of 2. The text is in the center. It is floating left, and the text 7XL, and it is bold. Save this. Now you can see here are the 3 squares which we specified in there. And we can also give it a background, BG base 300. So now for the board component. So inside there we also want to return a heading, because it is basically the main thing. So we can say inside of the heading we want to return if there's a winner, or if it is a tie, or if it is still playing. So we can say, yeah, we want to return a status. So now for the status, we have to initialize a variable. So we can say something like let status, not state, status. So we have this variable and it is undefined, but we can give it something like winner. So there you can see the status. And we can give the h1 some styling to make it look better, something like text-2xl, so the text is bigger than a normal paragraph. And then we can say there's a margin bottom of 2. And then we can add all of our square components, give it a value equals to 1, and there's our square. But we don't want to create 9 squares and align them properly and stuff like that. So we can make a variable for that, which we can call const initialize board, and this is an arrow function, and we can call it. And you can call variables with curly brackets in React. Initialize board. Now you can see the square is gone, because inside there we are not defining any HTML. So we have to return the HTML to render it. And so a normal Tic-Tac-Toe board has 3 columns and 3 rows. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then 7, 8, and the 9th square. And we also want to make something similar like this. So we can do this by returning an array, and we can say it has 3 slots. So it's basically this, or rather it's these 3, and then we can say fill each of those slots with null, and then we can map over each of these 3 slots inside of the function, and then we can say we are getting the item, which is basically null because we filled it with null, and the index, which we call a row index, and then we can make a function which would be curly brackets, or we can return HTML which is in normal brackets. So we are returning HTML and we are returning a div, and with React, if you are mapping over something, you are basically creating a list of which has every component of the array which you're mapping, and every HTML component which is in this list must have a key component, a key attribute, which is individual to this item in the list. So now we can say it has the key of row index. So yeah, and then now that we have these three, we can say every row needs also 3 squares, so we can map over. So now we can create an array, a new array with three items in it. So that's basically, we are saying we are going in the first item of the first array, which is the 1. So now we are here, and then inside of that we are creating a new array with 3, which are these 3. And we are also filling this with null. So we are saying dot fill null, and then we are mapping over each item of the array, and we are taking the item which is null, which we defined, and the index of the item, which we will call column index, and then we will return some JavaScript code which will be in curly brackets. So there we will create a square index. So every item, every HTML item which we will return need a specific key. So we'll now create this by basically saying row index, which we defined in the first array up there, times 3 plus the column index, which we get from the second map function. And then we will finally return our square component. So we can say square, and can say the key, which we need because we're using React, is the square index, and the value can be also the square index. So now if we save this and we look, because there's an error. Okay, so because we are returning HTML, we need to call it like a function with normal brackets at the end. So now you can see there are our 9 squares, and now we can see that we said there's a button, but if we click those, nothing will happen. So in order to define a function which will run when we click the button, we can say onClick, and give it a function. But we are not defining each square individually. We are making it programmatically by looping over arrays. So we also have to make this onClick function dynamic. And we can do this by passing down another prop, which we will call onSquareClick. And this will be a function which we define in the board and pass down to the square. And then we can just call it in the onClick event. So now let's define the function which will handle the click. So we can say function handle click. It has a parameter e, and we can say alert and we can say something like click and the e, and then we can define the onSquareClick prop, and we are saying this is a arrow component inside there, and we are saying handle click, and then we can say the square index as for the e. Save this, and now when we click this, you can see there's an alert with click 8 because we clicked the 8th. We clicked the 9th, but because the 9th square, but because arrays start with the array index starts by 0 and not with 1, so it will say 8 and not 9. So now we want to calculate a winner, and we can define a function for this outside of the board component, and we can say function calculate winner, and it has a attribute called squares, and in there we are defining an array with every possible combination of squares which a player can win with. So we can say the first combination is 0, 1, and the second square. So if somebody clicked the first, the second, and the third square, so basically this row, he will win. So I will just copy every possible combination. So then we have the second and the third row basically, and it goes on. So now that we defined every possible line with you can win, we can loop over the array by saying for let e is equals to 0, and then we can say as long as e is lower than lines dot length, which basically is the number of items in the lines array, so the number of this, and then we can say after each iteration you have to add 1 to e. So now we can get one item which will be e, and we can destructure it, its content in A, B, and C, and we can say is equal to lines e. So e is basically the index of the current item which we are at, and we are getting the content from the item and destructuring it in the variables a, b, and c. And then we can say if squares, which is this above, it will be an array. We can say if a, which is the first square, if this, and we can add another statement which has to be true by adding two and signs, and squares of a is equals, so it's the same as squares b, so you can just copy this and paste it, b and a, so is equals to squares of c. So if every square which is defined in the item of lines which we are at right now, if every one of those has the same value, then we can return a winner. So we can say the winner is the value of the square a, which is basically you are taking the first square of the winning line and saying this is the winner, so the value of the first square of the winning line, and then we can return the array of the squares which won. And if nobody won yet, we can just return now. Return now. So now that we have this this function, we want to destructure the return. So we can say const winner is equal to calculate winner, and we are passing the squares, and we're saying if this winner, so if this exists, we want to get the winner. So you can just copy this line and say lines instead of the winner. And then we want to check if there is a winner, then we want to set the status to the winner. So we are checking if winner, then status is equals to winner and the winner. And if it is not, else we want the status is equals to next player and then we want to define some props in the board component. So first of all, we want to pass down from the app to the board component which one of the players is next. So we can say is next, and we want to pass down our squares, which we are using all the time, like above there and there. And then we also want another which is called onPlay. So down there we say if there isn't a winner, we want to say we want to add some text. We are saying x is next, and we want this is basically a Boolean value, and we are creating an if statement as a one-liner. So we're saying if is next. If there is something, then we will return a next, and if it isn't, then we will return a 0 or an O, a big O, capital O. So we are basically saying if this exists, then return the 0, and if it doesn't, this is basically the else, we will return the O. So you can save this, and then we want to change something in the handle click. So on every click we want to check if there is a winner. So we're saying if calculate winner with these squares. So we're passing down to the calculate winner function our squares prop. If there's a square, or which are these two pipe operators, we are saying squares e. So this or basically means that just one of those two so that one of those two statements needs to be true. So we are calling this block. Then we want to return. And if there isn't a winner, we are saying next squares is equal to squares dot slice. So we are slicing up our squares prop into an array where the item is an individual item from the squares. And then we are saying if there's an next, then we want to set the next squares e, which is this above, and we want to set this to a capital X. And else we want to set it to the e to an capital O. And then beneath that we want on play, which is our prop up there. We want the next squares. So this on play we are passing down our next squares. Our next squares variable to this function. And then for the square we want to change the value. So we want to say squares is equal to the square index. Not curly brackets, because it is an array. So we are setting the value of the square to the value of the square index. So at the start it will be null, and if we click it, then we will check if there is a winner, and if there isn't, then we will set it to the sign which player is playing at the moment. There is an error. Lines. Why is this an error? Unexpected squares. Unexpected token expected. Oh yeah, I missed the bracket. So now you can't see anything because we added these props, but we didn't add them to the app.jsx where we called the component. So now for the app.jsx we can use some React hooks, which is the next main concept from React. So hooks are basically function which React gives you, so you can create these apps more better. So first we are using the useState hook, which just defines a variable basically, and then you can use a function to set this variable. So we're saying current move. This is basically the name of the variable, and then the next is the name of the function, which we can set the variable. So we can say the variable is called current move and the function is called set current move, and this is equal to useState. So every hook starts with use. You have to import this up there, and then you can say the default value is 0. And then we have another, which is called x is next, which we are passing down to the board, and it is basically the current move. And then we are using modular, which is something in math. So we are basically checking if it is equal or not. So we are dividing it by 2, and what modular basically does is you are dividing some value, the current move, by another value, and if there's something left, it will return this. So basically, if you're saying we divide 9 by 2 with modular, you won't get 4 or 4.5 back. You are getting the 1 back, because you can get the 2 4 times in the 9, and then there's the 1 left. So it basically gives you the 1. So now we are checking if this is equal, and we can say this by equals 0. So if it isn't returning anything, the current move isn't equal. So it's, and this and this value are we passing down to our board component, and this is the same. And then for the squares prop in the board, so squares is equal to current squares, which we also have to define. So we are saying const current squares is equal to a useState hook, and the default value is an array. So for an array you have to use these brackets, and we are filling this array with 9 items which are null, and we are passing these down to the squares. So now we can we also have to pass down another prop called onPlay, and this will be equal to a function which we have to create, and I will call it handle play, and we will pass the next squares to it, and this, save this, and then we can show, because I think there are a lot of errors. Save this. Now you can see there are our 9 squares, but now it still looks really quite bad, so we can add some styling to it. So there we can add a div, and inside of this div we will add our board. And the auto div, the div with the data theme coffee, we'll give it a class name. We'll say W, the width is full width of the screen. The height is also the screen basically. Then we will say this is a flex component, a flex container. We'll say flex-row items -center justify -center. Save this. Now you can see we have our squares like a tic-tac-toe field in the middle. Beneath the board we will add another div which also has a class name, which has margin left of 20, and this has a button with the text restart, and beneath this there's a unordered list, and inside of this unordered list there will be the history. So we are adding a list component or a list item, and we can say history, and we can give the button some styling. We can say text-2xl. It is a button. This button class is coming from DaisyUI. It is a button, and this had a margin bottom of 4. So now you can see this is the button. And we can give it an onClick attribute, on click, and we are passing a function called restart to it, which we also have to write. So we can say const restart is equal to an arrow function. And inside of the restart function, we can set the current move to 0. So we're doing this by set current move, which is a function from the user state hook, and we can set it to 0. So this will set the value of the current move to 0. And now we have to create another function, which is called jump2. This is for the history feature, and we can say next move. And for this next move, we can set the current move to the next move, which we'll pass down. And then we can, for the history function, we can add another use state. We will call it history, and we will function as set history, and it is a use state. And it is basically, you can copy out the thing from the use state from the current squares and paste it in the history, and then we can set the current squares to be equal to the history, and from the history we want the current move. Then for the handle play function, we can create a variable called next history is equal, and there we will destructure our history array. So we can destructure arrays by using ... and the array, and then we are slicing it. So we are saying .slice, which will slice the array, and we are saying 0 and the current move plus 1, and then at the end we will add the next squares, which we have up there. And then we will set the history to next history, and then below we will set the current move to next history dot length, so we are getting the length of our variable minus 1. And then for the restart, after the current move, we also want to reset our history. So we're saying set history, and then we can just copy it to set it in. And then we want to create a variable which will be the list of history moves. So I will call it const moves is equal to history dot map. So we are taking every item from this list and taking the item, which we will call squares, and the index, which we will call move, and we are passing it to some JavaScript code, and we are defining a description, yes. Let descript description, and then we are checking if the move is bigger than 0. We want to set the description to be equals to go to move hashtag plus the move. So basically we are saying if this item isn't the first item in the list, so then we want to set the description, and then after that we want to return some JavaScript, and we are returning a list item, and because we are using the map function and we are using React, it has to have a key attribute, so we are saying the key is the move, which is the index of the item, and inside there's a button which has the description, and the button also has some on-click event, and when it is clicked we will use the jump to method and set it to the move. So this is all for the app.jsx, and now we have to go back to the board.jsx, no, to the square.jsx, and we want to add some more props. So we are saying winning lines, and we want to pass down the square index. So what we now want to do is we want to highlight the line which is winning, or which one. So to do that we want to use variables inside of our class name, and we have to change the string of the class name to be a string with backticks, and because we're using JavaScript in there, we have to surround these backticks with curly brackets. So now we can use variables inside of that. So after the bold, I will delete the background color, and we are saying if there are winning lines and the winning lines includes, which is a function from arrays, this square which we are getting by the square index, we want to set the background to be a base of the content. It should have a border of 2, and the border color is base of 300, and the text color is the base of 300 also. And if it isn't, we just set the background to base of 300. So now we have to pass down these new props inside of the board.jsx component. So we are going there inside of the initialize board function, and now we are saying the square index is equal to the square index, and the on square click function, we also had that. The winning lines are equal to the lines, and then we can save that, and now we can test it. So if you can see, we click this, so we started, the first player has the X symbol, and now you can see the next player is the O symbol, so we can click that, and then if we are winning, you can see the background color changes and the color of the text also changes. And our state up there says the winner is the O symbol. So you can see we don't have any history, and that's because we are missing something in the app.jsx, but we can test the restart. This. So the restart is word king, but the history, yeah, so we are creating the history array up here, but we have to render it inside of the unordered list. Save this, and now you can see there's our history, and you can click through it and you can see that it updates the board as we are going to the through the history. So you can see the first move was in the down left bottom, and the fifth move was in the middle. And then you can restart and play again. So if you liked the video so far, please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a project suggestion in the comments for more weekly uploads. In this section we will host our Tic-Tac-Toe app on the web. So for that we have to go to GitHub and create a new repository. So you are going to github.com, creating an account. Then you can click up there on the plus and new repository, and then you come to this page. So there you can specify the name, something like Tic-Tac-Toe app. You can make a public repository so everybody can see this repository when they visit your account. I will choose a private one. Then down there you can leave everything, create repository. Then you will go to this. So this is an empty repository, and we have to connect our code which we have locally to the repository. So to do that, we can first add every change which we made. So we're saying git.add / this. So this basically initializes a local Git repository in your project, and then we can commit every change to the local repository. So we're saying git commit, and then you can type your commit message there, and yeah. So I'm just dumb. We first have to initialize our local Git repository. Then you can see the Visual Studio Code, which has the source control. They now recognize that there's the local repository. Then we can add every change which we will make, which we made, and then we commit it, commit -m, and then the first commit, so your commit message. Then you can see we committed it to the local repository, and also in the source control you can see there's our first commit. Then we want to set a branch which are different like folders in your repository, and we want to set our branch to the main, which we can say by -m main, and then we want to connect our local repository to the to the one from GitHub. So we're saying git remote add an origin, and then you can copy this URL and paste it down there, hit enter. Yeah, you have to add a space. Git remote add origin space and then your URL, and then you have to push every change to the GitHub repository. So I'm saying push -u and then the origin, which will specify the branch, and then you're saying we created the main branch up there, so we are saying main, hit enter, and then if you refresh you can see there is our code which we made. If you want to change this text, you can go in the readme.md and change it, and something like my TicTacToe I can't type app. So this readme.md is a markdown file, and you can get a markdown cheat sheet by googling it. And then we can also change the title of our website. We can do this by going in the index.html under the title tag. We can change it to TicTacToe, and you can also change the icon by adding your own one, or you can delete it and then you don't have any icon. Save this. Now you can see there isn't an icon. Now we have to commit the changes to our GitHub repository again. So now if we go back to there and refresh it, you can see the readme changed because we changed it. And then we can now go and host it. So for the hosting I'm using Vercel. So you create your account on Vercel, and then you can add a new project, and you can see there are all your repositories from your GitHub account. If you can't see them, you have to connect your GitHub account to your Vercel account. Then we can say import. This will be the project name. I will just leave this. And for a framework, so we are using Vite, so we are just choosing that. So, and every other setting you can just leave for the default one. Then click deploy, and now it is deploying your app which you created in this tutorial. If it finished deploying your tutorial, you can see this congratulations screen, and then you can continue to the dashboard. Under the domain, this is your domain which you can find the app on the internet. And if you don't like the domain, you can go under the settings, under the domain, and there you can edit it to, I don't know, TicTacToe app, or you can say something like Sebis, which is your name, Sebis TicTacToe app. And then if you save this, then you can see that it is valid, and it assigned it to the main branch. So now if you go to this URL, you can see it is working, and your app is also working, the Windows X, and you can restart. And you can also use the history feature. This was it for this tutorial. Please leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment, for example project suggestion for more weekly uploads. And if you have problems with the tutorial, you can also write a comment. I will respond and help you. See you!